Friends is a show that many of us grew up with, and it ranks pretty high on a lot of people's lists. It's honestly one of those shows that I can just watch over and over again. I'll just put it on as background noise most of the time because I just know the show so well. But something that has become painfully obvious is how badly some of the jokes and storylines have aged. In today's video, we're going to take a look at just how offensive Friends has gotten. In season 1, Rachel dates a charming Italian man known as Paolo, who barely speaks any English. Like, it's clear that long, thoughtful conversations were never really on the table for this new couple. Unfortunately, we soon find out that he literally has no personal boundaries when it comes to women. Despite knowing that Paolo has the sexual control of a dog in heat, Rachel decides that it's a great idea to tell him that Phoebe is a masseuse and where she works. He soon makes an appointment without telling Rachel and drops his robe in front of her, revealing his salami and meatballs. What makes this worse is the fact that he actually looks like he's enjoying making Phoebe uncomfortable. As Phoebe gets close to Paolo, he begins stroking her leg and grabs her butt. Now, according to section 130.52 of the New York Criminal Code, groping someone in the private areas can land you a year in prison. Despite this, the studio audience bursts into laughter as Phoebe is quite literally assaulted in front of us. As of 2020, most people know that this kind of activity is far from a laughing matter, but in the 90s, not so much. So after the incident, Phoebe rushes back to her friends at Central Perk to tell them everything, except for Rachel, of course. If the show was made now, I would like to believe that they would have just called the police straight away, but in the series, their support was very misguided. Sadly for Phoebe, she was more worried that Rachel was going to be mad at her and accuse her of stealing her man. I was shocked when she said,
"She is gonna hate me."
Ross replies with,
"Yeah, well."
This is followed by a roar of laughter from the audience. What the fuck? In Ross's defense, he does tell Phoebe to tell Rachel as it's a feminist issue, but really it's just him inferring that women being targeted like this is just a normal thing. Racial diversity in Friends has always been a discussed topic throughout the years. Considering how multicultural New York is, it was a little weird that the main 6 characters in the show happen to be white, straight, and middle class. There is Ross's girlfriends, Charlie and Julie, who lasted a number of episodes, but other than them, it's mostly all the same. At the end of the show, 4 of the 6 main characters were coupled up with children, with Joey planning to do the same. Now, in 2020, it seems a little narrow-minded that all 6 people would want to go and do what is now considered a traditional lifestyle that many people were once pressured into pursuing. This is really shown by Ross and Monica's parents, who were disappointed by Monica for not being married with children before 30, while Ross is seen as the golden child because he has a job at a museum and has a son, despite the fact that the relationship with his child is pretty awful. I mean, we barely see him, and his ex-wife being a lesbian is literally the butt of the joke from the first episode. So Chandler and Joey are a duo favored by many fans, so it might come as quite a shock to hear that in 2020, they would have been considered borderline predators. I know you're probably screaming at your screen saying, "Oh, come on, JS, could you be any more wrong?" Well, let me go over a few things that they have done. Chandler once asked his female employee to go on a date with him instead of firing her. Then he fires her anyway. He also left a semi-naked woman handcuffed to her desk overnight, though she did kind of do the same thing to him. Chandler dates Janice on and off for years, although he openly says he dislikes her, just so he can get laid. In the show, the joke is that Chandler cannot dump a girl, but if that was the case, why does he keep going back to ruin her life over and over? Now, on to Joey. First of all, Joey tries to have sex with all of his female friends by saying the line,
"How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?"
Can you imagine turning to a friend nowadays and just coming on to them in such a nonchalant way? In one episode, he tries to get into a Thanksgiving party because all the models there will be drinking and not eating, which is a surefire way to get blackout drunk. The fact that this excites him is alarming, yet it still gets a good laugh out of the audience. Finally, when Chandler settles down with Monica, Joey insists on only getting hot young girls to live with him in the apartment. He also makes a pretty perverted word game to see which girl he has a higher chance of sleeping with. He says pillow, she says fight, he then says doggy, expecting her to reply with style, but she says kitten instead, ruining her chances of finding a new apartment. Whether it's a fantasy or not, having sex with someone in your workplace is not only going to get you fired, but may even cause you to get arrested for indecent exposure. But Ross tops that when he and Rachel do the dirty for the first time in the museum he works at. Not only do they do it in the caveman exhibit, which is pretty gross itself, but they also wake up butt-ass naked in front of children and a nun, with just a little tiger pelt to cover themselves up. Surely they would have gotten in trouble for this, right? Wrong. Like, how did they only wake up when the kids flooded through the doors? Did they not have security checks? Maybe in the 90s things were just a little bit more relaxed in the workplace. For a doctor, a good rule of thumb is to not sleep with your patients. And that rule is even more important when the patient is the girl you used to babysit when she was little. This happens with Richard, who is a family friend and the eye doctor of the Geller family, which is a little suspicious as none of them wear glasses. Maybe this was written so that we know he was only looking into her eyes as she was growing up, but it makes it grosser knowing that we don't know when he became attracted to her. I mean, it's not like he was her gynecologist or therapist, but you have to admit, this relationship is not only unorthodox, but super creepy. In classic Friends fashion, the awkwardness is pushed to the extremes when Monica makes out with Richard's son later on. I guess it's good that Richard and Monica never rekindled their relationship and got married because it would have made for a really awkward Mother's Day. In the episode where Ross and Rachel hire a male nanny, Ross struggles to get his head around the fact that there's a straight guy who could also be a nanny. So much so that when Rachel hires Sandy anyway, Ross becomes incredibly uncomfortable with having him around. When he says to Rachel,
it's like if a woman wanted to be...
Yes?
king?
It clearly shows that he believes that some jobs are only meant for women or men. Sadly, this entire episode is full of outdated stereotypes, one of which being how the show turns homophobia into a joke. For example, Sandy starts talking about how he understands how hard it is for a woman to leave their child with a nanny, only for Ross to abruptly ask,
Are you gay?
And this is something that really makes the audience laugh. It doesn't really need to be said how rude that question is for a job interview, let alone how it's asked. But Ross doesn't make things much better for himself when he says,
You gotta be at least bi.
This focus on sexuality shows that Ross must be bothered by the idea of Sandy being anything other than straight. Not very modern at all, Mr. Geller. Ultimately, Sandy is let go because Ross just can't get over his own insecurities. Friends is a show loved by millions and is one that did incredibly well throughout its run. But the truth is, since many people have bravely campaigned to battle offensive and derogatory ways of thinking, Friends is just one of many TV shows that have not aged well in 2020. It's simply a product of its time. That being said, the creators and cast of Friends have admitted their wrongdoings and apologized for them. Despite the issues mentioned in this video, Friends will always be a hit TV show that also aired some powerful and controversial storylines that were praised by its fans. But that's a subject for another video. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by hitting the like button and tell me in the comments what you thought of it. If you'd like to see more videos like this, just let me know. Thank you guys for watching. Seriously, it means a lot, and I will see you next week.